stroke or no stroke, you're on the circle for a reason. And people that had stroke, we've been spared.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 116 of the Strokecast. I'm recording this introduction in early December as many folks are doing their Christmas and holiday shopping for themselves, and probably for other folks in their lives too. If you need any gift ideas, be sure to check out the Strokecast gift guide at strokecast.com/gift guide. I'll talk more about that after the interview, along with a few other personal updates. Leslie Hadley went from corporate executive to yoga teacher to stroke survivor and back to yoga teacher, and along the way, she added life coach, author, and tapping expert to her repertoire. She joins us in this episode to share her journey and explain just what tapping and the emotional freedom technique is. So now, let's meet Leslie. Leslie, thanks so much for joining me this week on Strokecast.
Thank you.
I guess the first thing I want to talk about is one of the areas that you've really developed your expertise in is in yoga. So how does yoga help stroke survivors?
Well, right now, I do yoga for myself every day, and I've been teaching yoga for 21 years. So for the last 2.5 years, I've been doing it for my old students, but also for stroke survivors. And every Friday, I give a class to survivors on Zoom. And it's small right now, but I'm hoping that it will grow so people can start coming into this community. So, yeah, I've been teaching for a really long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you were teaching yoga before the stroke then?
Yes, I was in corporate management for like 27 years or something. I was so stressed out that I started taking yoga classes, and I saw the benefit that it did for me. So I actually went in and trained to teach. So now I teach people how to teach yoga, but my whole goal is to teach people how to teach yoga to disabled people.
I hear a lot more about yoga these days, and even a couple of episodes back where we had Kristen Aguirre on, and she was talking about how yoga and breath work has really made a difference in her life post stroke. With your background in yoga going back to before your stroke, and as really that stress alternative to dealing with corporate life, I mean, how has the benefit you've gotten from yoga changed since your stroke, or how has your practice of yoga changed since your stroke?
When I first had the stroke, about day 4 after, I woke up and I said, oh my God, my yoga practice is gone. And then I said, Leslie, there is so much more to this. You teach this to people. So I started meditating. The meditation really put me on the right track. I still do a lot of meditation, and I just feel that yoga, it balances your brain. It's given me more feeling back in my arms so far. I also do Feldenkrais, so I do both. I feel a little bit more balanced, and teaching so long, it's been a really good experience. And it's an experience I want to share with people.
That's great. My background is as a corporate trainer, as just where I come from. And I found that, after stroke, just getting out there. And one of the first things I started doing on Facebook was just started just trying to just teach through Facebook posts, just some of the different things I was learning, everything about neuroplasticity and the brain and the way the body functions in a way that, this sort of random marketing guy had never thought of before. So that background as a training instantly comes into play when you go through something like this and you just want to share.
I agree. It's like yoga and Feldenkrais. It's all neuroplasticity. And I do other things, of course, but those are the two that I'm most passionate about.
So I think a lot of folks aren't familiar with Feldenkrais. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Feldenkrais has been known actually to really help stroke survivors. And what it is, it's very small movements where yoga is a little bit more focusing on your muscles and your bones. And this focuses on a little bit more movement, very, very small motion.
So it sounds almost a little bit like medical Tai Chi.
It's not as fluid as Tai Chi, but it does benefit you similar to yoga and Tai Chi, yes.
It's always interesting how a lot of these things, they just come back to the basics and some very old principles that we're able to bring into play in this modern world, and we're starting to see them more and more supported by science.
Absolutely. And I think without the brain and body connection, people don't realize how important that is.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that, I began to realize sitting there in the hospital and listening to and learning more about this stuff was that whole line between physical conditions and mental conditions is a heck of a lot fuzzier than most people realize.
Oh, yes. I remember the first time I got up to walk, I was like, this is something I've done since I'm a year old. And everything just changed, and people don't realize unless they have gone through something like this, how important things are and how we take things for granted.
And learning to walk again later in life is, just one of those things that, yeah, we've done it before, but the last time we did it, we were toddlers and the ground was a lot closer.
That's right. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter, and, she falls and she's like, okay. And she just gets right up. I fall, I break my hip,
Yeah, I remember I was sitting in an airport one day after stroke and watching some little kid just sort of walk around and wander around the seats and whatever, and he just kept struggling to falling down and getting back up, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, I feel you, dude. I know what you're going through.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to that day of your stroke. I mean, what happened that day? What was that experience and that process like?
I was working a lot and not sleeping a lot. And every day I went to this one particular exercise class, and I stroked in the exercise class. Something I did every day for, I'd say, 3 or 4 years. And I stroked out in the class, and I was very fortunate that the owner is a trained RN. So she's like, I'm calling the ambulance. You're going to the hospital. And they followed me to the hospital. I kind of had a feeling because my left side started going like numb. But yeah, it was like the craziest thing. Like, people said, you looked amazing. You eat well. I'm a health coach. I'm also a life coach. So it's like I live by principles that are supportive to the body, mind, and also to the heart. And the doctor even said when I got there, he goes, you would be the last person I ever expected. Yeah, I think it was like working so much. I had a toothache right before, and I was just like popping Advil so I could keep working, So, yeah, it was a crazy day.
Well, that's the thing. That's why we say when we talk about the importance of eating right and not smoking and getting your exercise and keeping cholesterol and blood sugar and blood pressure and all these things under control. Those are great ways to reduce your risk, but they don't eliminate it.
I had high blood pressure and I didn't know it. So, yeah.
That's the thing about high blood pressure is it doesn't hurt until it causes severe damage.
It's very scary.
So what kind of stroke was it? Was it an ischemic or a hemorrhagic?
I had hemorrhagic stroke. They said at this point the bleed has absorbed. So that's a good thing. Now it's just watching my blood pressure.
once you get to the hospital, and you talked a little bit about sort of waking up there and starting to rethink, what does this mean for your life going forward? But overall, what was your rehab and your hospital experience like?
I was in the hospital for 5 days, but I was in rehab for 7 weeks. And it was like PT, like 2 hours a day, and OT an hour a day. In the beginning, I had speech because, I had a little bit of a droop, which I don't have anymore. And after 4 weeks, speech said, you don't need us anymore. So we just added a little bit more on with PT.
So I imagine with your yoga experience and all of that, I imagine you were, in part, also educating some of the PTs and OTs about some things that you could do.
Yes, I was. You have that right. My biggest pet peeve is that they say good side and bad side, and I don't go there. And one PT said to me, well, go down with your bad side. I was going down steps. I said, they're both my legs. Neither one are bad. I told her that the affected side was the learning side and the non-affected side was the teaching side. Now, when I teach yoga to stroke survivors, I actually use those terms.
I like that. I like that because the language we use matters so much when we're trying to teach our brain to do something.
Absolutely. Because you want to bring positive things into your mind and you don't want to be negative. And I think by saying good side and bad side, I think that's very negative.
What was your favorite memory from your time in rehab? I mean, we generally think of rehab as it's a tough time, it's a dark time, but there are highlights in most people's experiences. So what was your favorite memory from there?
Well, I liked all the mat work because it was like it reminded me of yoga. I was still very flexible after the stroke. So all the PT, the therapists would come around and say, look at her. She's more flexible than we are. And so I like the mat work. I still like the mat work. And the walking was the biggest challenge for me.
I mean, that's interesting. You talk about, obviously being so much more flexible as a result of the yoga background. Does that also then mean that you had less issues with tone and spasticity down the road? Or, I mean, those do come from...
Oh, no. No, I have a lot of spasticity. In fact, I was talking to a friend yesterday. I said, after 10 years, do you still have spasticity? And he's like, yes. Like, oh, I can't imagine 10 years with this. But so, yeah, I do have spasticity, but I do a lot of stretching. I do pretty much every day heel raises and squats, and I do like 60 to probably 150 of each, depending. I find that the more movement that I do, the less tight I feel.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. It turns out that the things they're telling us to do in that case, they're right.
That's the one thing I pray about every night is, please God, get rid of the spasticity. I can't take this anymore.
Yeah, I know I've been lucky in my experience. It has been declining over the last several years, but I did just go back for my latest Dysport injections this past week. So whatever we can do to tame it.
So I have a question for you. Do you do Botox?
Sort of. I'm doing Dysport, which is basically another brand of Botox, and what I have found is that the Dysport, it tends to last about a month longer, and I guess they use a slightly smaller dose as well. But it's the same principle.
Okay. Yeah, I've not heard about that.
Yeah, it's newer. I think it's been on the market for only about a year or two. Yeah, I had my recent injection last Wednesday, the day after the election, and it seemed like the perfect day to go in to get a batch of neurotoxin injected into my body.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you're able to bring a lot of your core training and your yoga background and all of that from your pre-stroke life into your post-stroke life. But how has sort of your business and your approach to teaching and those things, how has that changed since your stroke?
Okay, I'm not running around like I did. Plus, most of the places are closed because of COVID. But I teach regular classes and a couple of prenatal classes. And I do chair yoga also for one of the local yoga studios. And we do it on Zoom, and it really has not affected me at all. Like, I have the same people I've had for 20 years on every Saturday morning.
I think that's really great. I think what I'm curious about then, I think a lot of folks are then is you're teaching folks presumably who don't have very many visible disabilities outside of your chair yoga for stroke, and you're doing that with living life with disabilities. So how does that work when you're teaching something as physical as yoga?
I can basically talk the class through, so I don't have to do a lot of it. On Zoom, they could see me, so if I want them to do something and I see that they're not like doing what I'm asking, like half of them are and half of them aren't, I demonstrate with my arms, so that's okay. Um, and so because I've been teaching so long and I teach people how to do it, I'm able to, just basically talk it through. But when I'm talking it through, I visualize myself doing that practice that I'm teaching them. So I keep saying, okay, what would your body need next? Where do you want to go with this? And that's exactly how I taught before. So it's working out really well. My students say that they can't tell the difference.
Well, I think that's a pretty powerful teaching technique too. The way you're able to approach that is asking folks like, okay, so where does your body need to go next? What do you need to do? And essentially helping to coach people through the learning process in that way can be a really powerful way of doing it. One of the ways you describe yourself also is as a transformational coach. What does that mean?
I basically help people to transform their mindset to get what they really want in life and to be focused on what they want. So it's basically to help people become happy, healthier, and actually more abundant. So abundance doesn't always mean money. It could be abundance of happy relationships and different things. I really love to coach people that are going through divorce because they're going through a lot in their life, and it's nice to see them get to the other side. I'm actually thinking about coaching survivors as well.
I know Jane Connolly, known online as Heal the Brain with Jane, has been doing a lot of that kind of work in the various classes she runs through the Like-Minded program, and a bunch of those folks have been on this show over at strokecast.com/like-minded. And so there's a lot of work happening in that space. Definitely a lot of need for it. But how would the work that you do then as a coach, how does that differ from, say, the work a psychologist does with people?
Well, I bring in a lot of different techniques. I've been trained in NLP. I'm certified in EFT, emotional freedom technique. So I bring that in. A lot of times we only do like emotional freedom technique. It just depends on, what they need and if they just want to do a talking session or if they want to actually do tapping.
So, what is the emotional freedom technique?
EFT is tapping on acupressure points, and it actually helps release past traumas and past things in your life that have held you back. I have a couple of clients, and they've had amazing results. That's my favorite thing to do as far as the coaching aspect. And I said to somebody the other day, if I could just teach yoga and tap with people all day, I'd be so happy.
So, how does that tapping then differ or is similar to the tapping that I know my PTs and OTs would do on muscles and various points on my limbs to try and get those muscles to turn on? How is that different?
You're tapping on acupressure points. So it's like above your eyebrows, side of the eyes, under your nose, under your mouth, your collarbones, under your arms, and then on the top of your head. And so it's not to like wake up your muscles or to relax your muscles. It's to help ease the things out that are holding you back. So, for example, let's say if you were hurt as a child and you were always told that money doesn't grow on trees and what do you expect me to give you all of this? So, a lot of times you grow up thinking that you're not valued. So, we tap on different aspects of finances or abuse as a child and things like that. I only take them into that place if I know that they're going to be okay.
So it's done in sort of that safe space.
Yes, absolutely. I actually have an EFT coach as well. And my daughter was getting married and I was paying for the wedding. So every week I would meet with my coach and we would tap on finances and tap on paying for the wedding. By the wedding day, I had that whole wedding paid for in cash. So it just changed my mindset.
Since you're not directly able to tap on folks in this COVID era with Zoom, is that something then you coach people through on Zoom for tapping on themselves, or does it not work that way?
Yeah, all my coaching clients were on Zoom. I do an hour 15 minutes with them. And, some have relationship problems, some have, financial problems. It just depends on what they have. But I love EFT. I've had great results with it personally and professionally.
It sounds like you're probably accessing a lot of the same points we typically hear about in acupuncture or, well, people who are actually doing acupressure. So how does tapping get different results from, say, traditional acupuncture or acupressure practices?
I took a training in acupressure, and it's different because one is more manipulating and the other is just tapping on the points. So it is different, but a lot of the points, yeah, they're very similar.
People are getting results. That is absolutely fantastic. I am curious if there are any sort of clinical studies that have evaluated the effectiveness of this that we can point folks to, or if that's just not something you're aware of that's been done.
I know there are statistics out there, but I don't know what site to find them on right now.
Okay, that's fair. This is one of those things where, hey, if it works, that is fantastic. Now, one of the other things you do is you're also very clear that you won't work with skeptics or people who are going to, sort of challenge the program. Can you tell me a little bit about that perspective?
I want to work with people that are open to change. And what I found a lot of times when I was doing a lot more health coaching is that people come to me, I want to lose weight, and then you tell them what would help them, and they say, okay, but never do what you mentioned, you never do what you recommend. So I just feel that if people want to work with me, they should come with a positive attitude, I would say.
And that makes sense. Having the right positive mindset, the right positive and action-oriented attitude is just so important when it comes to recovery. And that if you come into it with the belief that you're not going to get better, then you know what? You're not going to get better. You're going to make that come true.
Absolutely. And, mindset plays a whole big role, especially in recovery from stroke. So, yeah, it's really important no matter where you are in your life that you have a positive mindset.
One of the things we were talking about before we started recording was you recently injured your hip. How has just sort of the lessons you've learned post-stroke impacted your recovery and just sort of the process of living with that now?
I think the biggest thing is, they tell me my middle name is this. So I think the biggest thing is determination and being able to move forward, and also let people around you try to help them understand really what you're going through. Some days you might be sad and some days, you might be happy, but I say don't stay in the pity party more than a half an hour. Get yourself into a different location, see different people, and not be stuck in that pity party, because you're here for a reason. Stroke or no stroke, you're on this earth for a reason. And people that had stroke, we've been spared. We're given another opportunity at life. I guess most people would not understand. So it's basically work every day, even if it's 20 minutes, just do something.
Well, there's a lot of great stuff in that to unpack. First of all, I really like the idea of, here I am chatting with Leslie Determination Hadley. So I like that middle name. That's a great way to go. I also think we talk about not, sort of wallowing in self-pity and living in that. I think it's very important, as you pointed out. Go ahead and spend 20 minutes in there. Go ahead and spend 30 minutes in there. Allow yourself the time to, just feel sorry for yourself briefly. But then when that time is up, go ahead and do something. Go ahead and take that and get back to living the life you need to live. Do whether that's doing an exercise, whether that's going out and taking that next yoga class on Zoom, whether it's going out and helping someone else. It's, you can feel sorry for yourself briefly, but you can't stay there, because if you stay there, you're not going to get better.
Absolutely. You're going to keep just going down, down, down. I just feel like sometimes just helping somebody else through something. Like, I had a friend the other day, also had a stroke, and he was sad. So I said, let's talk. Next day we talked again, felt better. So that was good.
And we have got, and the stroke survivor community is just absolutely fantastic too. We've got a whole bunch of folks who are more than happy to chat and reach out and to help out one another.
Absolutely. I know I'm accepting many, many more stroke survivor people on my Facebook than I'm accepting others.
Let's talk a little bit then about your first book. Why did you decide to write it?
I decided to write the book. It's a book about basically challenges that I've gone through in my life. And it's called Awaken from Illness, Reclaim Your Life. So as a child, I was abused and whatever. And that's not my illness, that was their illness. But their illness played a part in my life. There is a chapter on the stroke, and there's a chapter based around yoga philosophy on healing from any illness. So it's a really, it's basically just my life. And I just felt like after the stroke, I just needed to get it down on paper.
One of the advantages we have of living in this era is there are so many different ways to bring a book into the world, from self-publishing to hybrid publishing to traditional publishing. How did you choose the path that you chose with bringing that book into the world?
A friend of mine had written a book, and she said, "Oh, I have a publisher. She'll probably want to work with you," because she works with a lot of females. So I used her, and it was a good experience. It made my life a lot easier to get the words on paper and get it out to the world. This time it's on Amazon, just the Kindle edition, and then I have the paperbacks here.
And I think that's really good to know too, is that, a lot of people talk about self-publishing, and it's great that it's out there, but at the same time, it could be a lot of work, and being able to work with an actual publisher to get that done for you and to work with that really frees you to just focus on the content itself, which is really great.
That was more important to me, was to get it's sort of like a book about how I would coach somebody. I give you exercises to do at the end of each chapter and things like that. But having a publisher made it a lot easier.
Leslie, thank you so much for joining us here this week. This has been great. I think we've really gotten some very interesting takes on some things we don't really think about, on the power of training and the power of yoga and what you can still do after a stroke life, and the importance of continuing to advocate for yourself through books and leveraging those tools and leveraging those connections we have from our lives to just sort of make these things happen. Definitely encourage folks to go ahead and check out the links over at strokecast.com/Leslie, where you'll be able to find links to Leslie's website and as well as all of the appropriate social media connections. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, Leslie. This has been great.
Thank you.
I really like how Leslie talks about the learning side versus the teaching side of the body. Plenty of times I do certainly wish I could just copy the data that powers my right side over to my left side and then hit a button to flip it, like when editing a photo, but it doesn't quite work that way. Still, the language we use matters. That's a theme I keep coming back to. It's why the word yet is my favorite word, because it is so powerful. I can talk about not being able to use my left hand or not being able to use my left hand yet. It's the idea of talking about a learning side and a teaching side versus a bad side and a good side. The words we use will shape our reality. As for tapping, well, that's certainly an interesting space. I mean, I've heard other people talk about it and report good results. Personally, I'm skeptical. But hey, if it works for folks, that's great. I mean, I'm certainly not going to go ahead and yuck somebody else's yum. So it is sort of a very different kind of thing, kind of falls into that alternative treatment realm, I suppose. So let's revisit for a moment how I look at and evaluate alternative treatments. Generally, it is with a cautious optimism. You see, when it comes to looking at alternative treatments for stroke or psychological trauma, there are a number of things to consider. First, is there science backing it up? If there's studies and credible studies that support it, great. If there aren't, well, proceed with caution. Next big thing to look at is it harmful? What's the risk? And if there really isn't any risk of harm, if there isn't any significant chance of harm, well, maybe keep on going. Next thing, and this is one where a lot of different things can get caught up, is will it take away from traditional therapy? Because there are a lot of traditional therapies that are boring and that we're supposed to do, and we don't necessarily want to do them. We don't necessarily want to do our exercises and take the time we have to spend with them. But the thing is, if we do them consistently and do them right, they tend to work. I mean, the science does back it up. So will engaging in a non-traditional therapy take away from the time and dedication to traditional therapy? If it does, then seriously reconsider that. Similar to that is, does it cost a lot of time or money? And this is, of course, going to be relative and different for everybody's circumstances. But if it's not taking too much of your resources, great, maybe it's worth investigating. I talked a lot more about this sort of rubric that I use in the episode strokecast.com/snake oil. And I suppose one example would be the questions of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, where we find is that there's no science backing it up as a treatment for chronic stroke disabilities. But it's also expensive and takes a lot of time, which means it distracts and takes away the time that could be much better spent on traditional physical and OT. So the hyperbaric oxygen therapy for most people is probably not a good way to go. But looking at all of these different metrics and the different ways of looking at it, I mean, if tapping and the emotional freedom technique appeals to you, definitely check it out and learn more. I mean, I'd love to know what you conclude or what your experiences are. You can certainly learn more from Leslie's website, and you'll find links to that over at strokecast.com/Leslie. And that brings us to our hack of the week. Get a wagon. You see, my girlfriend and I actually just upgraded ours since we kind of wore out our first wagon. It's a simple 4-wheel wagon with a big old canvas bag in it and a nice long handle. And it's how I get packages out of the lobby of my building and up into my apartment. It's how I get groceries from the car to the apartment as well. And heck, even when we get the Amazon Fresh groceries delivered straight to the door, it's how I get them from the front door of my apartment into the kitchen. Generally, it's just how I move a lot of stuff around the apartment. Basically, when there's stuff that's going to take 2 hands or multiple trips or multiple arms to move around, or that requires a bit of distance, it's going to go in the wagon. And you see, when I pull the wagon around, I also don't need to use my cane, because the wagon handle is going to give me the stability that I would get from the cane. So the wagon is definitely going to be helpful in that case. In general, I find that just having the wagon, and I think my girlfriend would back me up on this, it's definitely helpful for just getting stuff from place to place, whether you have disabilities or not. And, actually, now that I think about it, my grandmother used to always take her shopping cart with her when she would go walking around her Brooklyn neighborhood. It actually made her feel less vulnerable than she would have with a walker. So that, again, can be another perk, something else you can use a wagon for. So where can you find such a wagon? Lots of places online, of course, and one of those is, of course, the Strokecast gift guide at strokecast.com/gift guide. The Strokecast gift guide is a collection of links to things that you can order from Amazon. You'll find books by previous Strokecast guests, including Leslie, other books that have been helpful to stroke survivors or that I found particularly interesting around recovery or that have been frequently recommended to me. You'll find other items to aid in recovery, like the eStim kit that I use to stimulate my left arm, the electrodes that go along with that, cane tips, various AFO alternatives, all sorts of stuff like that. You'll also find some life hack type gadgets to make living life with disability a little bit easier, like the aforementioned wagon, along with things like my one-handed can opener, the one-handed bottle opener, some alternative shoelaces, and a whole bunch of different gadgets and gizmos. Now, the links on that page are affiliate links. So what that means is that if you do buy through them, I will earn a small commission, although it will not affect the price you pay in any way. So be sure to check that out. It's strokecast.com/gift guide, and hopefully you can find something for yourself or for someone else in your life, especially as we head into this holiday season. I also just completed another project. I use Microsoft OneNote to manage the production of Strokecast episodes. It's one of my favorite software tools, and I've been using it in various ways, professionally and personally, since about 2003, when it was in beta. I actually just published a blog post that goes into detail about how I use it to put an episode together. I used the notes that I made back in May during my interview with Ella Sophia, who also happens to be a OneNote fan. You can get that behind-the-scenes look at an episode over at strokecast.com/OneNote. I also want to share that I was recently a guest on the What's It Like podcast, where I share my stroke story with Hannah. What's It Like is an interesting show. Hannah interviews a different person in each episode about a different extreme experience. Other guests have included a nudist, an Ironman competitor, a service dog user, a cult member, and really a whole lot more. There's 30-some episodes now, so if you're looking for another podcast to listen to, be sure to check out the What's It Like podcast. You can find the episode I appeared in and links to that over at strokecast.com/Leslie in the show notes for this episode. Finally, I want to share a note on the gap between episodes here. Back in early November, a few days after my Dysport treatment, which is a Botox alternative for tone and spasticity, where basically it's an injection of neurotoxin into overactive muscles to calm them down, so less active muscles have a chance to come back online. And by the way, I happened to get that the day after the U.S. presidential election, because scheduling an injection of neurotoxin the day after election day seemed pretty darn appropriate. So anyway, I was working in my storage unit a few days after that and trying to organize it a bit so I could find stuff. And I probably should not have been lifting heavy boxes and then balancing them on my affected shoulder with my head. Anyway, I seem to have either hurt something somehow, and a shoulder muscle or two decided to check out, or it had something to do with Dysport. I don't know. I'm leaning towards the overuse and throwing too many boxes around. But regardless, it managed to leave me with some shoulder pain that moves back and forth between my shoulder and my shoulder blade. And yeah, that sucks. It took me a while to figure out how to protect it. It's interesting because it's at its worst when I am sitting up, when I'm sort of just sitting straight up and down. And that's a problem when working at my desk. When I slump down in my recliner, it's fine. When I'm slumped down on the couch or in the bed, it's fine. Standing is okay, but something about just sitting straight up and down puts the wrong kind of stress on something in my back or shoulder in some way. And the thing is about dealing with this after the stroke is that it's not just that the pain hurts, but that it takes a bunch of my spoons, a bunch of energy. So I reserved my energy for work projects so I can continue to do things like, get paid and continue to service that addiction I have to food, shelter, and clothing. Once I figured out that I could slump down and take care of things still, I could start getting back to normal, just working from a different computer in a different room. But when I go out now, I actually wear my Give More arm brace again to just further protect that shoulder. And why am I telling you all this? Well, see, that's the thing about recovery. I can do a lot of stuff when everything is going well, but my internal system just doesn't have any slack in it anymore. There's no buffer space. So when something goes wrong, there's not a way to easily absorb that and just go on as normal. But you see, ultimately, that's what I still have to do. I have to recover and I have to go forward. Yeah, so that's what I've been working on. And then, of course, my girlfriend and I celebrated Thanksgiving while she was recovering from cataract surgery, which went really well, by the way. She's amazed at what she can see now, and I'm kind of amazed at how fast those results happened. So if cataract surgery is something your doctors are recommending for you, it's definitely something to take seriously. She's getting great results, and she's getting ready to go back in to get the other eye done next week. So the point is, November has been a heck of a month. I had to prioritize the things I could, fit other things in when I could, and just complete a whole bunch of different projects that I was involved in. So that's where I'm at. I've got more episodes coming up. I'm taking much less Tylenol now than I was at the beginning of the month, so I must be feeling better. And with responsible use and care, I'll be back to normal in no time, whatever that means. So that was a lot of stuff. So where do we go from here? Well, first of all, what I'd ask you to do is go ahead and visit strokecast.com/Leslie to see the show notes from this episode and to learn more about Leslie Hadley and find links to Leslie's site, as well as learn more about her services, yoga, and tapping. For your holiday and Christmas shopping needs, be sure to check out the Strokecast gift guide at strokecast.com/gift guide, where you'll also find Leslie's book, and a wagon, among a whole bunch of other stuff. For the behind-the-scenes look at putting together an episode, check out strokecast.com/OneNote, and of course, be sure to share any of those links far and wide. And finally, check out the What It's Like podcast for a variety of different stories about living through an experience of some sort. You'll find that link and all the others I talked about today over at strokecast.com/Leslie. And of course, finally, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.